know that we're going to be recording just to make sure that if people weren't able to come, they can see it on our YouTube later. Okay. So hi, I'm Emma Pekar. I'm a freshman majoring in geography and sustainable development at Miami University, and I intern here at the Interfaith Center.
And I'm owner Tech Tosh. I'm also another one of the interns here. I'm just joining in today. I'm a freshman as well, and I major in information and cybersecurity management.
Yeah. And then the Interfaith Center is located in Oxford, and our mission is to unify people through relationship building, dialogue, and social action. We are very excited to have you guys joining us this evening as we learn more about the impact of fast fashion culture. First, we're going to hear from Runa Ray, a fashion designer and environmentalist who uses art and activism to advocate for policy change. And then we're also going to hear for local solutions from Shana Rosenberg, the founder and executive director at ThreadUp Oxford. So to start off, I'm just going to give more of an introduction to Runa. She's been extremely involved in the world of fashion and sustainability, having recently dressed folks at the Grammys and the Met Gala. She's worked extensively with the Sustainable Development Goals and climate action at the United Nations. And as an innovator, her designs encompass the reduce, reuse, and recycle model. By keeping the end in mind, she has helped revive ancient indigenous techniques of garmenting that reduce our impact on Earth, alongside science-based ideas from renewable energy. And her expertise in circulatory of the fashion industry and zero waste initiatives helps designers, SMEs, and MMEs in combating climate change. So, Runa, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I have a question. How much time do we each have to speak? Because I can keep talking. So, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
Sorry, can you say that again? My computer.
I mean, how much time do I have?
As much time as you'd like.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, we're here for like an hour, so okay. About like 30 and 30. We'll split it like halfway.
Okay, Shana, I won't take up your time, so I'm going to make sure that I stay within my time limit. Well, thank you so much for having me. And that was a wonderful introduction. Yes, I am a fashion designer. That's what I studied. And I turned environmentalist. That happened almost by accident. And to give you an insight on this is, let me talk about the fashion industry, right? Now, everything that we wear right now is started from a sketch. There's nothing that cannot happen without a sketch. And if you look at sketches, you're talking about paper, and you know where paper comes from. Most of it is from, from the trees. And there's very little paper that is actually recycled. So you need to really step back and start from the base. But rather than going so much in depth, the fashion industry relies on sketches. After the sketches are made, then it is sent to the pattern maker. What happens here is, again, you have paper patterns that are constructed, and then it's put on these, you get the muslin, like you get the cotton on which you draft these patterns. The reason this is done is because you do not want to waste the expensive cloth. So you rather make prototypes with cotton. And we keep hearing about how cotton can be can be a thirsty crop. And it is true when it comes to certain regions, because if you are buying, say, for example, if you're buying cotton from Egypt, and that does not come from a rain-fed area, it comes from an irrigated land. So it is going to be thirsty. Most of us do not know where we are buying our fabric from because there is no transparency. So when you go into making these prototypes, you have a lot of these prototypes that are generated. Then the next stage that it goes into is where it is shown to the product managers. You have a team meeting, everyone sits together, they look at the prototype, they either like it or they don't like it, and then you have a gold seal sample that's made. Once the gold seal is made, then it is then sent across to the designers, where the designers look into the prototype, they like the fit, they like the way the lapel looks, they're like, okay, cool, let's try and see if we can have a different lining on the inside. Then it goes into the kind of print that we are going to make, or the kind of dye that if we're talking about a jacket, the kind of dye that the jacket is going to have, or probably the weave that will go into the fabric that's going to be made into the jacket. So when these developments actually happen in a corporate, you are talking about tons of wastage, because if I had to dye a swatch that was 5 inches by 5 inches, it would take the same amount of energy, same amount of time, and same amount of resources and color to make probably 15 yards, because that is what you're engineering to making that one small swatch, which has to either be approved or disapproved. So then this is like a game that keeps happening. So you have the vendors who come, give you the samples, you either like it or you don't like it, you change it, you're like, you know what, I like this color Pantone, and yours is probably 2 shades off, so you come back with another one. This amounts again to a lot of hidden waste. So that is the dyeing industry. The same thing happens when you're making fabric. So what happens is that you have different weaves when it comes to fashion, right? You don't have just a plain weave. You have fabrics that are knits, you have fabrics that are wovens. And when you look into the woven category, you've got like, you know, a crosshatch, you've got, a dobby weave, depending on the kind of weft and warp interconnection. So the designers sit down and say, you know what, for this jacket, I would like to have this one particular weave. So the guy goes and he makes the weave and he comes back and brings it. You don't like the weave. You're like, no, I want it to be changed, because you know what, my team said it would look nice if we had the weave slightly differently. So again, there's a game that's being played over there too. Similarly with the prints. So all this accounts to a lot of hidden waste till the final one jacket is made. Once that one jacket is made, then you have size sets that are made, which means it either goes from extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. And then then it goes into the market where it's tried and tested. If it doesn't fit, the whole thing is scrapped, you restart again. So this, in a nutshell, is the fashion industry. And this is what got me thinking about the major cause, not just about fast fashion, but also the waste that is generated because of fashion. And fashion's waste right now is the biggest problem. It's not, yes, we do talk about consumers. We are talking about how we need to manage what we are wearing. I completely agree with that. But what I also think is extremely important is how do we actually look at the waste that is generated in the fashion industry? Now, that is one aspect. The other aspect of the fashion industry is the people behind the clothes. Now, we keep listening to that. Now, I have actually been witness to it. So most of us wear denim, and we know we love our jeans, right? I mean, everyone likes it. I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone who hasn't worn denim. But the way denim is manufactured most of the times is you have a large company, say it could be based in the US or it could be based in Europe. And because of the price factor and because of the volumes, you need to source it from a country which would probably give you would give you the best price. So what you do is you go to South Asia, and South Asia is great. So when you go into a factory where you're assuming that they're doing the jeans for this one particular brand, you don't see what's happening inside the factory because they're already outsourcing your jeans to another organization that the brand has no idea about. The reason for this is because the factories need a lot of orders, and more orders means more money. But they do not have the capacity to give you 1,000 jeans, but they take it. So how are they going to give you 1,000 jeans? They give it out to, factory A, factory B. You go to factory A, it's just a shed. You've got boys who are like probably 15 years old working on these. You have these inflated balloons upon which they kind of have the denim, which is stretched. And all your denim is scraped using sandpaper because it's cheap. Labor is cheap. You're not using pumice stones because that's what they do in large scale productions. But you do have a pumice stone machine to show people, yes, this is what we're doing. But eventually what is happening is it's all scraped by hand using sandpaper. Now, what happens with that? You are in an enclosed room, you have fibers all around you, it lends itself to occupational lung disease. So this is one aspect of the denim industry. The similar thing goes into the dyeing industry, where you have brands that place orders with factories. Most of the effluents are taken into the waterways at night. And this is supported by the politicians because these are large factories. It contributes to environmental racism. A lot of people who live in the hinterlands suffer with it. I have been witness to the fact that you've had dogs that have waded into these rivers and actually come out looking the color of the dye that's happening in the factory. So if they have predicted that you're going to have pink, which is going to be the next season's color, and all the dye is pink, you'd have the dogs wading in and looking pink. The next season, they would be looking blue. And it sounds funny, but it really isn't. And this is a huge problem. So you have the dyeing industry, which have the effluents, you've got the humans behind making of the clothes, and at the same time, you have fashion's waste. So how do we basically tackle this problem, right? My solution is pretty simple when it comes to the design crowd and people who are kind of venturing into fashion. I would say start with the end in mind when you're designing garments. What do I mean by saying end in mind is, where do you want to end your garment? I mean, where does your garment want to end up? If you're doing sportswear, now most of the sportswear has polyester, right? You need it for longevity, you need it for durability. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have a jacket that is, say, for example, polyester, the reason I'm saying polyester because it's the most contested fabric right now, but I'm trying to also give, the devil its due. You're making a polyester jacket and you've got a metal zipper, you've got your thread, which is probably done out of poly cotton, which is a polyester and a cotton mix. You've got a print, you've got an embroidery label, and you've got all these elements that come and they make it very beautiful. It's a trend-based design and everyone likes it. It probably lasts, say, 10 years because it's of good quality. And you're really happy. It lasted for 10 years. And now what are you going to do with it? So then you decide to go and give it to a secondhand store. The secondhand store will look at it and say, okay, great, maybe I can resell this. Or they may be like, I can't do anything with this, so let's give it to a Red Cross. A Red Cross again looks at it and is like, either you can sell it or you can't. If you can't sell it, then it goes back to the country which manufactured it. Now, when it goes back to the country that manufactured it, say it's somewhere in Bangladesh, what do these guys do? Bangladesh is a warm country. They're not going to be using something that you wore in the mountains. So they need to see how they're going to take it apart. When they try to take it apart, because the designer has decided to use polyester, has decided to use a metal zipper, embroidery patch, and a plastisol print, it becomes almost impossible because you have so many elements. So how are you going to even take this one jacket apart? Now, if you had a polyester jacket using polythread, you had a metal zipper which could be recycled, gone back again to the global south, sold in the, in the secondhand industry and reused, perfect. But what are you going to do with this one panel which has a print? Either you can have that panel cut separately and sold separately, but then that wouldn't even match any other fabric. And similarly, you can take out the embroidery can be sold because people do that. You have embroideries of brands that are sold as patches, and then the biggest challenge happens because the designer used a poly cotton thread. So when that happens, you have your seams. You're going to cut the seams off because it's impossible because you can't even, it's polyester and cotton. It has to be a one composition. This is what I mean by saying keeping the end in mind. So there are different ways of actually thinking of upcycling your garments. And if you look at it, there are many, many innovative ways that you can actually use the garments in your house. Like, I keep telling people, like coming back to the jeans example, if you cut the bottom off your jeans, you can just sew the bottom and, use it as a pot for a plant and completely eliminate plastic. Because you have the denim, it's a sturdy fabric, you put in soil, you have a potted plant growing out of your jeans, and it's perfect. It looks wonderful. It's pretty artistic. But we cannot put too much of pressure on consumers because they already have this. They already have the pressure. There are a few guidelines as to how a consumer can take care of the garments. One is, of course, we know when it comes to washing, we got to be careful. We do not wash too often. We wash once a week. It's got to be on cold rather than, on hot, so that the microfibers don't get into the system a bit too much. But coming back again to design, I think we also need to look at the environmental and social governance, and also trying to understand what is the best way that you could mitigate your carbon footprint. Now, as a designer, everyone's got their own particular style. Somebody is a very print-based designer, or someone is like, I work only on cuts. And the other person is like, oh, my specialty and what makes me unique is that I use these particular dyes, which makes, like the tie and dye t-shirt that you're wearing, so people would be like, this is where I stick out because this is my specialty. So once you determine your style and what makes you unique as a designer, try and see how you could probably mitigate that carbon footprint and see how you could bring that down to almost zero, so that even if you have 20%, I'm not saying we could ever reach 100%. It's not possible. It is not impossible either. But if we could take care of that 80%, which comes into most of your designing, say it's printing, then you're definitely taking care you're going to take care of the entire collection in its entirety. So what I did was, for me, I love prints. Now, when you read about my bio and it spoke about bringing back ancient and indigenous techniques, is something which I've always been interested in, because if you guys go to the museum, have you ever wondered as to how the fabric still remains even after 500 years? I mean, we're talking about fast fashion, but we know that fast fashion right now is because of the petrochemicals, and we're talking about synthetics, and we're talking about fabric that is packed together in a landfill and that does not cause any sort of decomposition because of the bacterial. It's almost difficult. But the reason these fabrics that are made of linen, that could be made of hemp or even cotton, last long is because of the weave. It's the way these people used to weave their fabric, and that creates longevity. What's happening right now is not just fast fashion. It's also like, that's why I keep telling you, it's also about the fabric. The way brands make their fabric, it's done so quickly that it will not last that long. So we need to also think of cross collaborations. If a designer can go to a weavers guild, for example, and work with them, you're creating your own fabric. You know where you're getting your cotton from. Now that's a different story, but I will come to that. You have your fiber, you're creating your yarn, you're giving it to these people, and you're making your own fabric, and you're completely responsible from A to Z. If someone questions you, there is no question about not being transparent, because you have gone to the farm, you have seen what the farmers are going through. You know exactly what is a GMO seed and which is not. You can also help them in their indigenous seeds because you are contributing to that part of the economy. You're killing the middleman, you're getting fiber, you're taking the fiber, you're going and making your own yarn, and then you're giving it to these people to weave it for you. And at the end of the day, you can make your own weave and combinations with different natural elements. I think that's awesome. And that's how we should probably go ahead. So if a designer owns the process from start to finish, then I don't see any problem existing. There also has to be, coming back to the dyeing, and what I did was I tried to revive the art of water, the art of floating inks. Now this was done in 12th century Japan, and it was stolen, I think, by Europe, and they keep doing it for a lot of book bindings, but not everybody does it on fabric because it's laborious, but it's worth it. And what happens is that you mitigate water wastage and water pollution. The reason being is the water is contained in a trough. 6 gallons of water can help you print 200 meters of fabric. And the only agent in this is seaweed, which is used as a coagulant, which means that it's non-polluting, and water contained in a trough makes it, mitigates water wastage. Otherwise, you're just wasting water. And here, when you can see what is around you, you can always control the wastage. And for me, wastage is really important. So this is what I did with this is one idea of using ancient and indigenous techniques. The other thing that I have right now, which is in progress, is called the Peace Flag Project. And this was endorsed by the United Nations, where we again used fashion's waste for a social cause. I have worked with prisons, I have worked with children, I have worked with adults, and it's about having canvases where people write the commitments towards climate change and peace, because I believe that environmental justice and social justice cannot exist independently, because they're all together. And if you do not have environmental justice, there is no possibility of even having peace, because right now you have the war that's happening. And if you look at the war, it's affecting even fashion. I mean, if you look at it on an agricultural, on an agricultural basis. So what happens is that we take these commitments and we sew them together, they create flags, and it's exhibited at the United Nations. It's about connecting humanity. It's about getting people to understand that we are all the same. And at the end of the day, who made your clothes? You have no idea, but you still wear your garment, but you probably hate that person for no reason. So it's all about bringing people together through fashion, and at the same time, trying to find a solution for fashion's waste. So I think I can go on and on about this, but I think I should probably give Shana a chance, and then I'm open to questions after this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I really liked how you talked about just like the concept of it kind of being like a manufacturing thing too, because especially in the news, like I feel like you hear a lot of blame on the consumer, that like the consumer is not buying sustainable items. So
yeah, no, I agree. It's a lot to do with education, but then there's a lot of greenwashing that's happening right now with even being sustainable. And when I was at COP27 last year in Egypt, that was one of the questions we asked H&M, because when H&M came by and said that they were using, trying to come back with recycling. Now, that is not a very new concept. It's an old concept. That's how paper is made. I mean, paper is made by using garment scraps, and that's how you make actual paper, where you do not cut trees and you're recycling garment scraps and you're creating the fabric. But when you have something which is so nascent, there is no claim that you can make by putting out placards in your shop and saying that I can recycle faster than you can give me back, because that's not true. Yes, you can probably recycle. I never said you couldn't, but what is the speed of recycling? And the similar thing is even, probably even with plastic. I'm not saying all the plastic recycling is bad, but I've also been to plastic recycling places where they recycle plastic and it's just a mess. There's so much of fumes, and we're talking again environmental racism. So how in this industry, which is so fragmented, it is very difficult to pinpoint. I mean, we're just not talking brands, but all I can say is that each and every individual person, including designer, needs to, run with the flag.
Yeah. And then Shana, do you just kind of want to talk about what you do here in Oxford and just like all about ThreadUp?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Shana, and I'm the director of ThreadUp Oxford. And what we do here is nothing like what Runa is talking about, and it's actually on purpose. So I looked at the problem of fast fashion, textile waste, overconsumption, and those are very, very large problems. Those are global problems that affect economic, humanitarian, just every single facet of this earth is affected by how fabric is treated. And it was funny that you had said that any shop that says that they can recycle it faster than it comes, they are trying to put one over on you for sure, if that is something that is said. So ThreadUp Oxford was started back in 2021 as a solution for the local community, for the region, to be able to look at all of this textile waste. And in my case, I'm not just talking about clothing. I'm talking about absolutely all fabrics. So what we did in 2021 is we started with a recycling drive. And so just a group of us, group of ladies that were bored from COVID isolation, I guess. We got together. We were able to get almost 2 tons of material over the course of 6 weeks of pickups, drop-offs, and then a final collection date that we had at our local library. So then we were just a group of ladies that had almost 2 tons of material. So at that point, I started to think about, the different ways that we could redistribute that out into the community, and to encourage creativity and upcycling, reuse. And I actually hesitate to use the word recycle for our business at all at this point. That's something we want to look at in the future. But right now, we're very, very focused on helping the community learn through panels like this and through lectures at Miami that I do, speaking engagements, just to encourage the local community, to help with this global problem by considering their choices. So, I loved what Runa said about not putting it on the consumer, because it's almost impossible to fight that cultural behemoth that is fast fashion. There's just so much out there for so cheap that people just don't understand. But what we do is try to encourage people to think about their use, to lower their consumption of new textiles, and to think about it differently, that there's just so much cloth in the world that they can use secondhand, or they could create things, or they can have other people create things for them, like beautiful upcycled clothing that I've seen in boutiques all around. Sorry about this light. So that is kind of the basics of, why we exist. In reality, this is a secondhand clothing store, as well as selling some home textiles, yarns, fabrics. We have a textile makerspace, where we have folks that are able to come in and use sewing machines and knitting needles, crochet hooks. There's a knitting machine, there's a loom. Like, we're just trying to get people to come into the space and really explore what they can do with all the leftovers. So one of the things we do with clothing that does not fit my standards for selling is we put it outside of our store for free for people to pick through for whatever reasons. Unfortunately, some people in hardship do pick up the clothing, but also folks that do house cleaning pick up t-shirts for rags. Crafters have picked up prom dresses that are stained, for the fabric, and done all sorts of textile arts and crafts. So in essence, that is what we are trying to do. We're trying to be like a movement in the local community to reduce textile waste. We've been able to save about 30 tons since we started, from at least, if not a landfill, then at least from being unused, and preventing someone to use that instead of new items. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. Where exactly are you located?
So should I advertise? 5156 College Corner Pike, which is on the way to Walmart, near the Wendy's. So.
Yeah. And then just like a question for me. I heard you guys were like looking for volunteers. So like, if one were to go and volunteer there, kind of like, what do they do?
Yeah, sure. There's all sorts of things to do. Obviously, sorting through textiles is the biggest one. We are really, really happy that we've been able to grow enough to have 3 part-time employees, but volunteers are still super necessary for things like, what's clothing and what's a home textile, what's in good shape versus what's in bad shape. What could be gathered together, like towels in bad shape for like veterinarians or for shelters. There's also a lot of work to do in the creative reuse space. We're trying to get hundreds of pounds of fabric into usable shape for artists and crafters in the area. So there's always something for volunteers to do. Some of it, it's fun to just stick in earbuds and sort through fabric. And some of it, you know, people are making fat quarters out of, you know, scrap fabric. So for people to use in their quilting. So yeah, there's a lot for people to do.
Yeah. And then I'm just going to take this time to open it up to questions. If anybody has them, you can either unmute yourself or say them in the chat for either speaker. Thank you both so much.
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry. It's actually for Runa, if you don't mind. So I know, just hearing from you talk, the point that you brought up with the quality in the garments going down and like the degradation of like the materials being a part of the problem. So is there still like, I don't mean to sound morbid in a way, but is there like still like, would you still say like recycling is still like useful, or would you say that there needs to be more of like a monumental shift and like, or like sort of like a reformation of how like clothes are like made, like going back to how you're saying like putting more care into like using higher quality like garments and like higher different types of weaving to like make it more sustainable for like stuff like that?
Your question is awesome, and it's a global question. So to kind of break it down, this is my opinion. To break it down, we need to work within our geographical locations, right? And it is something that we need to also understand that, yes, there is a lot of import and export when it comes to certain fibers. But the US is also a great cotton producer. Let's talk about cotton, because cotton is something which is, you know, commonly spoken about, and people are trying to oust it, which is not right, because there's not much of knowledge when it comes to cotton. So yes, I do agree that recycling is important, because we need to start somewhere. And at the same time, we do have a lot of waste, like how, you know, Shana said. So what are you going to do with that? We need to recycle. And at the same time, we need to also try these nascent techniques of working with the craftspeople, because we always did that. I mean, there's certain countries who still do it, but because of industrialization, we've kind of moved away from it. But if we work together and still, you know, create a community and start reviving crafts. Now, when I was in Monaco last month, I was there for the Prince Albert Foundation, and I had this one collection that I displayed with them. And I was talking to one of the universities, which was the International University of Monaco. And since, you know what they say in Monaco, right? Every second person you touch is supposed to be a billionaire. And the school teaches you luxury. It's the only luxury business school that exists in Europe. And everyone comes there. But the biggest problem that most of the faculty face is that they were like, the students either want to be luxury managers, or they want to be the CEOs, or they want to work in the retail space, but nobody wants to talk about craft, because craft is the basis of luxury. And there's no craft. How are we going to revive craft? How can Monaco be the basis or the luxury hotspot, even when it comes to garments, when there is no way to even revive this craft? So there has to be a certain way. I mean, you do have brands who work again with the global, not the global South, with the South Asia, because it's cheaper. And you do have a lot of organizations that give you that kind of handicraft, but it's so fragmented. You still have a lot of artisans who suffer. But that's why I say we need to work within our geographical location. So what I spoke to them was, I was like, great, we're talking about craft. Now, what could be the closest craft that Monaco could associate itself with? Lace making. I mean, France has always been known for its lace making. but it stopped its lace making industry after industrialization because it started becoming all industrial. But apart from that, you still had people who were using hands and making lace. Now you need to go back to that. I mean, we're talking about how in the US we're trying to revive, mending, for example, or like how Shana said, you have different ways of upcycling. It's again going back to what our great grandparents or grandparents did, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there has to be a start somewhere. So it's a big question. It's a big question, but I think we all need to start somewhere, but think locally and still design globally. I don't know if that makes sense, but I do think that would cut down a lot of problems when it comes to logistics, when you have onshoring that happens. And it also, you own your product. You own it from the source. You use what your country gives you. Does your country give you silk? Does your country give you linen? Does your country give you hemp? What does your country give you and what can you use? And that is why we are designers, because you've got critical thinking. And that's where you work around these fabrics, or you work around what's given to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a really extensive and really great answer. I appreciate it.
Long-winded.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to ask a question. Well, first I wanted to thank both of you. These are really fascinating. I've been aware of the issues, but I've still learned so much because you both provided much more detail than I've looked at before. And while I had my video off, I was mending the secondhand slacks that I wore once, and then the hem came out, so now I can wear them again. So it just all fit. I actually have a question. Is it Shana or Shana?
It's Shana.
Shana, I have a question for you. I'm looking at your beautiful fabric behind you, and I have a terrible time with my own Zoom backgrounds because, I'm in my son's bedroom. I'm trying
to get this leg out of my face.
Yeah, how did you get that fabric up behind you? I want to know, and I want to come. I want to plan a.
It's a shelving unit behind me. It's just a shelving unit that we put like fabric over.
Okay. All right. So it's not going to be, I need something portable. I'll figure something out, but it's been inspiring. And I'll see if I can get a group of my friends from Cincinnati to do a field trip to Oxford and visit your store and think about how we can do some textile recycling through crafting. So thank you.
That would be fantastic. And I hope that you know about Scrap It Up and Indigo Hippo in the Cincinnati area. So.
I have heard about Scrap It Up, but I didn't know they had fabric. I'm writing those down and I will look into them. I am able to recycle shoes and denim through
the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. Did you know you can bring socks to them right now? And I'm going to take care of those.
Oh, cool. I didn't know about socks.
Yep.
Tell me more about what kinds of socks and what you end up doing with them.
Okay, sure. So Smartwool is a brand which I have investigated, and they are kind of greenwashing this, but they are not yet disposing of the socks. So I'm happy about that. Smartwool is a company that would like to have circularity. They are attempting to make new fibers out of the old, so to speak. They are also trying to make products out of socks like dog beds and some other things. So they started a program called Second Cut, where people could basically send back to them through a bag that they would provide when you purchase socks. Any brand in any condition, even if they weren't matching, they could send these back. Well, once a year, they have retailers, like where we can bring those socks to the retailers, and Smartwool will then pick them up, and that's in April. So actually, at the end of April, I'll be bringing about 450 pounds of socks to a Cincinnati retailer, Benchmark Outfitters, by the way. They're collecting for Smartwool Second Cut program, if you want to look at that. But the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub and I are collaborating to have me take care of the socks that they have been collecting as well over this past month. So that probably will garner hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And what we actually do is not just automatically send them to Smart Wool. We have volunteers that go through all the socks, because people tend to donate those, those hampers or those, those baskets full of socks they don't want to deal with anymore. And there's actually a lot of usable material. There's socks that we actually give out for free to anyone in the shop. And then any brand new ones that people like just ended up throwing in there, we give to sock drives like in the winter. So so even socks I see as like a problem that's big, that we can look at a local scale and try to do something about it. So
great, thank you for all that information.
And then did anybody else have any questions? Okay. I think we're gonna end it there then. I just want to thank you guys again, both for speaking on this topic. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.